Good evening, everyone. It's always a pleasure to welcome both familiar friends of avid learning and curious new faces as we come together to explore yet another chapter of our maximum city, Mumbai. My name is Asad Lalji. I'm the CEO of Avid Learning. At Avid Learning, we see the city as a living archive. Over the years, our programming has grown from a curiosity of Mumbai's many layers into a deep investigation of its cultural DNA, how art, architecture, community, and memory intersect in the everyday. It all began in 2012 with our Multipolis Mumbai series, where we looked at the many identities that coexist within the city's fast changing skyline, with unfolded into 57 episodes, many of them on this very stage. That journey led us to uncovering urban legacies in 2021, where we traced the intertwined stories of the city's diaspora communities and the roles they played in shaping the port city of Mumbai. Last year, our attention shifted to precincts that give Mumbai its distinctive sense of place. Through lively talks and immersive walks, we rediscovered areas like Shivaji Park, Kamdevi, Masgon, Kotachivari, and Kulaba. For the third iteration, our flagship series, we zoom into Bombay's everyday icons. The first two episodes, we examine taxis, public clocks, statues, wells, dabbawalas, and Irani cafes. In case you missed any of these sessions, they're all on Avid's YouTube page. We encourage you to go see them. This evening, we ask, what do a heritage fountain, a double-decker bus, and a very spicy vada pav have in common? These urban symbols are bound together by their deep-rooted presence in the city, whether pouring quiet beauty into the city's traffic-filled junctions, zipping across neighborhoods through the city's endless monsoons, or serving lip-smacking flavors on a street corner. They carry a sensory and emotional thread in the story of a city that we all call home. And that brings me to the task at hand. Avid Learning, in collaboration with the National Gallery of Modern Art Mumbai and the Kalaghoda Association, present Uncovering Urban Legacies, Icons of Bombay, Fountains, BST Buses, and Street Food. A special thank you to Ms. Nidhi Chaudhary, Director NGMA Mumbai, and Deputy Curator Shruti Das for hosting us. Avid Learning's creative partnership with the NGMA dates back to 2011, and tonight marks our 51st collaboration. Over the years, we've continued to build on our shared commitment to arts, heritage, and meaningful public engagement. And also to the Kalaghoda Association, we have Brinda Miller in the house. Thank you. So without further ado, please join me in welcoming our expert panelist, conservation architect Vikas Dilavary, Assistant Professor Kavya and co-convener Amchi Mumbai, Amchi BST, Hussain Indorwala, broadcaster, YouTuber, food writer, and actor Kunal Vijayakar, and our moderator for the evening, author and architect Meera Godbole Krishnamurthy. Let's get ready to explore these stories behind some of our favorite icons. Thank you, and over to you, Meera.
Welcome to this beautifully conceived series of conversations about the city. It's not often that there's an effort to understand a city not just through its architecture, its infrastructure network, its demographic data, its fiscal health, its political ethos, but also at a visceral, tactile level through all the senses, which in turn stimulate the intellect as well as the emotions. In reality, I think it's the only way to truly understand any place. But still, red buses, water fountains, and Bhelpuri, I think it's kind of a challenge that Avid has thrown at us. How does one tie these three together? Hopefully we'll figure it out by 8 p.m. Today we have three Mumbai icons speaking about three quintessentially Mumbai features. Vikas, Hussain, and Kunal are not only fonts of information and knowledge, but also embody the essence of an engaged citizen who is critical for a city to thrive. So we'll begin with each of them presenting a brief introduction to their topic as it relates to their profession, their interests, their practice. Then we'll have a conversation all together, and then we will end it with an audience Q&A. Vikas, would you like to start?
So I've been a conservation architect practicing in Mumbai for the last 35 years. Have restored about 65 buildings. The first decade was spent in awareness. The second decade was spent in actually doing buildings. But last few years, which is the last decade, I was fortunate to work on some of these fountains, and 4 of these fountains came as projects, and it was interesting. My brief was only to restore them. But the challenge, what we realized, was to restore its water engineering. What's the point in restoring a fountain when the water doesn't pour from it? So these are the 4 beautiful fountains which we have. You might wonder what the last building is doing, but that's also a fountain, and it's an excellent PPP project with Kalagoda Association. The 2 of them, the Mulji Jetha and the one which you see. So fountains is a concept which really started in 19th century in Europe, talking of improvement, hygiene, and the city as a visible and as a better living space. How to drink piped water, that's how it started, and it came to India in quite in a big way. We have about 60 odd fountains or drinking water fountains in South Mumbai, out of which 12 are prominently located in fort areas. So this is the B.H. Wadia Clock Tower, 1880. It was done in a memory of Mr. B.H., which is Bomanji Homasji Wadia. And it looks as a clock tower, but it has a drinking water fountain inside. This is the fountain as restored with the help of Kalagoda Association, and you can see the trough which was meant to be there inside. So the water fountain served, there were water fountains which were of 2 types. One were the small fountains which were designed for drinking water. The other fountains were really ornamental fountains which defined which helped in being ornamental ornaments of the city. And they found an important part of the cityscape, like Flora Fountain, or for that matter, this fountain, or Mulji Jetha Fountain. So this is the fountain located with the clock tower, and this predates Victoria Terminus Station by few years. The other most interesting example was Wellington Fountain, which you see. This was the only functional fountain where the water was flowing in. Otherwise, most of your fountains, water never used to come in. But unfortunately, this was painted in layers of paint, and it is only with the help of conservation, conservators. Intact Mumbai chapter helped in conserving these. When we realized that they were marble busts, this is what you could see. And it's a beautiful cast iron upstairs. Again, very located in a prominent location. The other ornamental fountains, which was always a collaboration of an architect with a sculptor. So this particular fountain is by the same architect, F.W. Stevens, who's designed Victoria Terminus Station. And John Griffith from JJ helped in executing it. It's interesting that Stevens, who was known for his Gothic revival architecture, has gone for a Indo-Saracenic architecture because the brief and the client demanded it in such a manner. So it's interesting for a conservation architect. It's a delight when you see an etching, and when you see this, if you make that black and white, it is just the same thing. And that's where, and it's good that we got this opportunity to do it. And this helped me while I was restoring Flora Fountain to restore its water engineering. Again, a great fountain. You have a child's image on the top, who's the son who who was 14 years old. So granite columns, a lot of animal and foliage which is there, which was a very typical characteristic of Indo-Saracenic. And of course, when you study the water engineering, which is a separate subject, we can talk about it. Again, an etching, an old historical photograph, and to make it exactly the same with the same cast iron railing, and to make it as an active space for the city. Otherwise, people used to pass Flora Fountain. No one used to appreciate, or no one used to, enjoy the plaza. So this has been the journey, and we'll be happy to answer questions and things like that.
So
I'm going to be talking about BST buses. I'm part of an organization, a citizens forum called Amchi Mumbai, Amchi Best. And we started in 2017. Our intention was to bring focus to the various kinds of crises that are facing the utility, this icon of Mumbai. What BST in a way represents is the ethic of public service and a reliable, affordable, and safe public transport system, which was very much a part of Bombay's history. What we are seeing increasingly is that there is a systematic effort to dismantle it, to convert it into simply feeder service for the metro system, and there are various kinds of experiments which are really transforming what BEST is. In fact, we could probably in 2-3 years, if Avid does a session on history, maybe we'll talk about BEST at that time. So in order that so that doesn't happen, we Amchi Mumbai, Amchi Best are trying to bring back, in a way, it's kind of like it's a conservation project. We're trying to conserve BST and to retain it as an important public transport service for the city. So BST is one of the oldest public institutions in Bombay. It began as a private system, Bombay tramway service. In 1905, it was combined with electricity supply. So BST has two divisions, bus services and electricity supply. And it was set up as a cross-utility subsidy model, which means that, in simple terms, the surpluses that are generated from the electricity distribution sector are then used to cross-subsidize public transport. Public transport, as you may know, everywhere around the world, it cannot run for a profit. It's not a business. It's a public utility, a public good. So the question is, how do you finance public transport? And the way it was done in Mumbai was that the electricity division cross-subsidized BEST. In 1947, of course, BST was municipalized, meaning it became 100% public. And it worked beautifully for 60, 70 years. In fact, all around the world, BST was hailed as a model of how a public bus system can be made to work in a largely poor country. Of course, the best model for BST was the model that it was before this current phase. Now, this chart, it's actually pretty simple. What you see is three time markers, 98, 2008, 2018, and 2024. And what you see here is the share of people or trips that are made on different kinds of transport modes. So public transport, which means suburban railways and buses, intermediate public transport, which means your rickshaws and taxis, and then you have private transport, that is two-wheelers and four-wheelers. And what you see is in 98, about 74% of the city's trips were made on public transport. And this has steadily declined to 72, to 55, and now it's around 50%. Now, what is interesting about this graph is everywhere in the world, city governments are trying to do the opposite. They're trying to move from there to here, whereas in Mumbai, we are moving from here to there. And this is really alarming because more private transport means more fuel consumption, which means more emissions, which means more air pollution, and so on. So one of the important things that we need to think about as a city is how do we get back to this kind of share of public transport. Of course, metros are being built, but metros are not going to be able to provide the kind of ridership that buses and trains provide. It's almost impossible. So we have to think really hard about how to make buses and trains really central to how people move in the city. This is a simple chart that shows the ticket fares of BST. As they were increased, the number of people who were using BST declined. And when in 2019, after a lot of public opposition, when the authorities reduced ticket fares, that is when the number of users on BST went up again. What is key here is that the reason why so many people use BST, and you must have seen the long queues outside every bus stop, is mainly because it provides really affordable fares. No other transport system can match the kind of affordability of the trains and buses. There is a misconception amongst people that buses create traffic congestion. But if you see the amount of road space that is consumed by different transport modes, buses actually occupy only 1.1% of the road space, but they move a very large number of people, whereas cars occupy about 60% of the road space, but they move about 12 to 14% of the people in the city, which means that buses are a very economical and a sustainable mode of transport. But of course, buses are seen as a cause of inconvenience to people who use private vehicles, which is why also there is a pressure on BST to be downsized. This shows you in a way how much of fuel one consumes by using different modes of transport. So if you're using the suburban railway, every passenger for every kilometer traveled uses only 0.25 paise fuel cost. On the bus system, it's about 60 paise. On the metro rail, it's about 2 rupees. But if you drive your two-wheelers and cars, it is much more. So even from the perspective of climate change, sustainability, it makes perfect sense to move to buses and trains. In fact, people have been talking now about, climate adaptation and climate action. Moving people to buses and trains is climate action. Of course, in recent years, there has been increasing efforts to subcontract a lot of BST buses. What BMC and BST have been doing is handing over buses operations to private contractors. And that has created a whole host of problems. Buses catching fire, many contractors withdraw their services, long waiting times, long queues of, the efficiency of BST has come down. There was an accident recently in Kurla, and that has to do with cost cutting that comes with private contractors running BST. They don't maintain the buses, they don't pay the drivers well, which is why you're having all of these problems. So what one really needs to think about, and as citizens, we need to re-emphasize that BST has to run as a public transport service. It is a service, it's a public service, it's not a business. Thank you.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Full disclosure at the beginning of this conversation. The other two panelists over here are genuine experts. I'm just a man who eats, so please don't take me for fact. A large part of what I discuss is opinion, and I may be a little wrong in information here and there, but please forgive me for that. The subject is street food or food, iconic food of Mumbai, and it's one of the most difficult jobs that have been given to me because it's very difficult, I find, to identify the iconic food of Mumbai. We are sort of stuck on vada pav for the last many, many years. But when I think of my childhood, there was no vada pav, and I'm not that old. So we only had batata vadas as children. The vada pav came somewhere around the 70s, copied from a guy who was selling omelette pav. And so there was an omelette pav stall on one side and a batata vada stall on the other side. And as the story goes, again, I don't know about fact, as the story goes, he said, "Arey, if this fellow can put omelette inside the pav and sell it, why can't I put the vada? It's convenient. People can take it and walk instead of holding a plate with two vadas and dipping in chutney and eating." So, on the other hand, this is the batata vada. On the other hand, the bhel puri, which is, I think, quite unsung compared to the vada pav, because everybody talks about vada pav, vada pav. The bhel puri is something that has been there in Mumbai even before I was born. Chowpatty, beach, bhel puri, iconic according to me. So if given, if asked my opinion, I would put bhel puri on the top of Mumbai's iconic dishes. The other problem with Mumbai is that unlike other cities in the world, like Delhi has the butter chicken, Amritsar has the chole kulche, Kolkata has kathi rolls, Surat has locho, and so on and so forth. We in Mumbai are stuck only with vada pav and pav bhaji. Because what is our iconic Mumbai food? I tend to think that all the icons, be it the Irani restaurants or the Udupi restaurants or the Mangalorean lunch homes or the Malwani Khana worlds, they speak volumes about the migrants of Mumbai. And all the food that we know today is largely based on trying to feed the migrant population their home food. So I am a guy from Malvan who's come to work in the Ratnagiri, Malvan, who's come to work in the mills, and I'm missing home food. So a little khanawad opens selling food that tastes of his home. Similarly, with the South Indians who came to work in Mumbai, did not want to eat in non-vegetarian places, wanted to eat South Indian, authentic ghar ka khana. And so the Udupis started. And so on and so forth, including the Mangaloreans. I've just done an episode with some of the old Mangalorean lunch homes in Mumbai, and they all tell the same story of how their grandfather came to Mumbai, discovered that nobody was making kori roti and, prawn gassi or whatever, and they took the mother's recipe, started these restaurants, and they are flourishing today. But these are all migrant sort of things. Then if you think about what is Mumbai's iconic food, that is inherently Mumbai. You can talk about the communities that are original Mumbai communities, like say the community I come from, which are Pathare Prabhus, but the food is not available to everybody. Or the CKPs, or all the other, even the original inhabitants from Gujarat, but their food is not available everywhere. So it's a tough job deciding on what is a Mumbai icon food. What we can discuss, which is quite interesting, is what are the oldest places in Mumbai with food. Like, for example, the cow gullies, which is a huge thing today, starting right from, the southernmost cow gully is probably Zaveri Bazaar and New Marine Lines, which is like a genuine cow gully, or even off Firoz Shah Mehta Road, there's a small cow gully. They say that the Zaveri Bazaar cow gully is probably the oldest cow gully in Mumbai. The oldest Udupi restaurant is Sri Krishna Boarding, which opened in 1942 at Matunga East, served over 85 years. The oldest Irani restaurant is Kayani, a Kayanian company established 1904, which is still goes back way before vada pav. Excelsior Cafe, which used to be inside the Excelsior Cinema, till they modernized it and they got a space outside, invented or launched the first burger in Mumbai, or the first chicken roll with mayo in it. Like Touche, and we were talking about Touche just now. Touche was the first people to launch sizzlers. I remember Bridge Candy, we were very young. When the door of Touche opened, smoke would just billow out, and it could be a body smelt of smoke if you went to eat there. Then you've got Mama Kane, which is, this is that sizzler. I don't know if you can see the smoke. Anyway, my slides are just to make you hungry, okay? So, and then there's Mama Kane, which is a fabulous little eatery at Dadar, on the west side of the railway station, 1910. And finally, the one restaurant that everybody knows is the oldest one, 1848. So these are, in my view, the icons of Mumbai as far as food is concerned. But we will delve into street food because I love street food. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Excellent presentations. I think they really set the stage. I'm going to back up a little bit, though, and have you formally set up sort of like a historical context for each of these elements that we're discussing. Starting with you, Vikas. You mentioned the story of Bombay's fountains stemming from the tradition of fountains in European cities that grounded plaza or a public place. And there were obviously two kinds. One was clearly for drinking, and the other were for more like sort of gathering spaces. Obviously, all of this could not have happened until there was the technology to have piped water. And could you just speak, that seems like a pretty critical element in terms, because it's a very unique sort of thing to have a fountain. So could you just speak a little about that technology?
Yeah, so as you rightly said, it's only when the lakes were established and piped water was available. Earlier there were wells through which people used to drink water, but to have a better thing and to do a kind of a philanthropy, that's how people decided to have these fountains. So it's a thing which just came from the West. But as some ornamental fountains, like in case of Flora Fountain, it was much elaborate. It was meant to be in bicolor because it was commissioned for the gardens, for the botanical gardens. But when the fort walls were demolished and the the Western India Agricultural Society was going through a bad phase, they decided to place it in the right in the heart of the city square. But the interesting thing is the commissioning of the two people, which is the architect and the sculptor, James Forsyth and Norman Shaw, was very well selected. And the sculptor had designed similar large-scale things in Europe, and that's how he got this commission. If you really Google search this person, Flora Fountain comes amongst his important works. And to connect it with water, and it was working with gravity at that time, so that was interesting. But off late it was modified, and there's a submersible pump put in. We could not enter the bottom shaft, and that was the element of surprise. So when we entered in very carefully, we discovered 3 sluice valves, and with that we could regulate the water. So now we made a manhole so that you can go inside, you can operate, so we have added. But the interesting thing was there were no drawings which showed which pipe is connected to where, so there was a lot of trial and error. But having said this, while I was restoring Mulji Jetha Fountain, you could go and you could understand how the pipes were connected. And the amazing thing is the drainage of water has also been designed. So our cities were designed so fabulously that if there's an overflow, everything will go away from that. So it's water engineering, it's planned efforts to improve the city urban design. So a lot of things, and of course the best architecture and sculpture.
Yep. Similarly, Hussein, if I know you touched upon this in your presentation, but if you can just let's just stick with the technology thing for a minute. When cities are designed and developed, technology plays a quite a large role in how even how far it's spread out. There are cities that are set up just for cars. Could you just speak a little bit about how Best went from being horse trams to the current electric buses, and how the layout of a urban design is dependent on access to various places? Also, originally I'm told the trams were free.
So no, that's a great question, because if you look at the urban form of the inner city, the native town as it was called during the colonial period, it developed in a time where there were no vehicles. There was usually people walked or they used animal-based transport, and which is why you have a fairly dense fabric, very narrow streets. The streets, like the cities which have a grid-like street pattern, the street structure is, as it's called, organic. And what this means is that, which is one of the reasons why some of these bazaar areas seem to be fairly congested. The tramways and the buses were the first real motorized vehicles which were introduced. And as I said, it was the electric supply and tramways which did this at that time. Now, one of the reasons why the fares of BEST or trams is so low is because you see the concept of public transport is something that today we have this notion that everybody has to pay for what they get. The public transport is based on a concept that in a city people are supposed to move so that they can get to their workplaces, okay, and when that happens, so a lot of this also developed when Bombay was an industrial city. How would workers move in the city? And when workers move at a very low cost, it is indirectly a subsidy to businesses because their workers can move from faraway places and come to work. So they don't, you don't have to, it's called a social wage, where the employers don't have to pay the workers so much to be able to afford expensive transportation. So so public transport in a way is good for the economy. And that lesson is something that was well understood at that time. So today, a lot of these current problems of BEST began when in 2003 the Electricity Act was introduced. And that's when electricity started getting privatized. And then there were a series of court rulings. In the court rulings, what happened was the cross subsidies began to show in electricity bills. So when people paid their BEST electricity bills, it said that this amount is going towards a cross subsidy to buses. And so people started saying, why are we paying for buses? So they went to court. And the judges in court, they said, no, users must pay. The public must not pay, but users must pay. That concept has seeped so deeply into our thinking that we don't understand anymore that public transport is for a general benefit. Even if I don't pay, everybody is gaining from public transport, just like water supply or any other essential service. So so when this cross subsidy was discontinued after a series of court rulings, that is when the deficits of BEST started mounting. And that's when the authorities said, no, this cannot do, and we have to make it more efficient, meaning we have to make users pay. So we'll bring in private contractors to run the buses. And then the fares started going up, and the ridership started declining. So they realized, ridership is declining, we have to do something about this. So they reduced fares. Now nobody talks about the deficits anymore because it is embarrassingly high. Despite despite privatization. So so now they talk about other things like electric buses and so on. You don't need electric buses. You can have diesel buses. It's still sustainable. You need electric cars maybe, but if you move people into buses, it is already doing a great job of preventing air pollution and all of the problems that go with it. Yeah.
Kunal, with you, I thought we'd start with the very basics. So what really defines street food? Does it have to be made on the street, served on the street, consumed on the street? Can it be raw? Does it have to be chewed? I mean, what
well, it has to be chewed.
Yeah. And I think, what I meant is cutting chai. Cutting chai is street food.
Yes, of course. I think
juices are street food.
Yeah, I don't know. We can discuss this, but anything that's available on the street will be street food, right from chana singh to kebabs that you can get on the street. And Mumbai is known for only Bori Mahalla and a few sort of Ghatkopar street food and pav bhaji. And I've recently gone up and down Marine Lines, New Marine Lines street food, and the food is terrible, to be honest. A lot of it. So you've got Chinese and you've got all kind of stuff. But you will not imagine what all is being made on the street right now. There is so much of interesting, terrible tasting, but like mayonnaise, okay? Mayonnaise is now in everything. They put it in vada pav, they put it on top of pizzas. I just don't understand it, And melted chocolate sauce inside everything,
Okay, we're going to talk about this.
So yes, it has to. It can be half made on the street. Okay. I know that vada pav vendors, a lot of them bring it from home, bring it from another kitchen. But it should be sold on the streets, at least.
And consumed on the street.
That is up to you. You can,
Yeah, I
yes,
suppose
you
you could
can
take it
consume
home,
it on
yeah.
the street. I have packed, like in Dadar, there are a couple of really good Malwani takeaways, not takeaways, roadside stalls.
Yeah.
You can stand there and eat, but I parcel and take it home and eat it. So it's still street food.
It's still street food. And food, just a little bit to set it in a historical context, food coming out of home kitchens and then you said lunch homes out onto the street. It's kind of, I mean, there's clearly a sociological shift that's happening. Like you said, the migrant workers were coming, or just people, you know, typically you find street food in like outside train stations or bus
Yes.
terminals or schools, office areas. So what is that sort of, you know,
So-
it affects urban design in many ways as
So
well.
I'll tell you what one social impact has happened, okay? If you look at roads like Tulsi Pipe Road, for example, opposite Kamla Mills, you will find ladies sitting with big dabbas of food. So there's a curry, there's a keema, there is an egg curry, there's fried fish, chapatis and rice and dal and a couple of vegetables being sold on the road, serving you in steel, those plates with containers in them, or you can pack it and take it home. In the chawls behind, this is where a lot of these women live. The whole chawl has work. If you're selling, say, 1,000 chapatis a day, somebody has to make 1,000 chapatis. Anybody who makes chapatis at home knows it's the worst thing to be able to have to do is to make chapatis. But it gives employment to a lot of women. Somebody's grinding the masala, somebody's cutting the onion, and somebody's doing the actual cooking. So there is a whole economic sort of system that is happening, especially among housewives whose husbands, so added income to the family. So that's a very interesting. We say one vada pav wala is single-handedly making, like Ashok vada pav, the most famous vada pav wala outside Kirti College. Ashok, whoever he is making all the money, So over here, this is, it's a community that is making economically growing.
Right. Hussein, when we spoke, all of us were speaking earlier, you said something that I think is, we should discuss further. You said that you were interested not so much in the buses as icons in terms of their physicality, but in terms of what they represent. And I think that is really something that is goes to the heart of what we're trying to talk about today. So buses were used by they were sort of like for the general public, which is what public transport should be, and represented, I suppose, access and urban equity, and everybody was using the bus. But with the city gentrifying and becoming increasingly unaffordable, the more well-off are in cars and private transport. So what are your views on the role of BST and the larger consequences of what impact this has in terms of how the city is divided, or how people come in and how they access it, or access is limited? Rather.
Yeah. No, that's a great point, because a public transport is for everyone. It doesn't discriminate whether you are living in Malabar Hill or whether you're living in Dharavi. We know, we watch Bollywood films, and older ones, and we see buses as a regular part of of life. When we do some of these events as Amchi Mumbai, Amchi Best, sometimes we call older artists to convene the meetings. Saeed Mirza, Amol Palekar, etc. And all of them have used buses at some point in their lives. Today, of course, middle class people don't use buses, because buses have become, from public transport, they have become poor people's transport. Trains still, to some extent, hasn't had that transformation. But buses are seen as poor people's transport. And as a result, they are neglected. They're neglected more and more. And as I said earlier, that the notion is users must pay, but when it comes to things like this, but when it comes to things like cars, everybody should pay for cars. Everybody should pay for a 16,000 crore coastal road project, which only 30,000 people use every day. 30 lakh people use buses every day, but only users should pay for that. The idea is increasingly that for the luxury amenities of wealthier people, everybody is supposed to, chip in. But when it comes to essential needs, they have to be run for a profit, which is essentially the divide that you're talking about in the city. And you can see that even in the way in which the city is transforming. I mentioned that the older fabric was pre-automobile, and so it was of a certain kind. And now everybody has cars. So what do? So you have the Bindi Bazaar redevelopment. What does that mean? You have to transform the entire urban fabric so that you can create all this parking and the cars can get to the development. So the automobile is transforming the city fabric as well, is leading to that, which means we are going to lose the urban fabric that we had before. Right, so, and then you have buildings which come up, which have 7 stories of parking, and then a podium building. The parks are in the sky. Only the people who live in those buildings can access them. There are no public parks anymore. They're all private parks, right, for the residents who buy them. So the city is moving more and more from a public city to a completely a private city.
Yeah. Similarly, Kunal, and I haven't forgotten about you. Street food is, consumed on the street with strangers, and it's always seemed to me like this incredibly intimate act that people seem to perform in public without flinching. And there are women eating pani puri on the street, but there are articles written about how women dare to dine alone in a restaurant. And I always sort of wondered, in very literal terms, going to what does street food represent, it's obviously the great equalizer. You don't know who's standing next to you, where he came from, what he or she. So it's economic, social, gender, religion. It's all sort of almost literally when everybody eats together, it's the melting pot of the city. I mean, it's too literal, but I mean, it really is. But on the other hand, you said that a lot of these foods have their own origin stories in very specific communities. So what does this really represent, that everything is coming together and becoming one, or is the act of eating an art in itself that is creating?
I honestly I have not thought about this, but I can admit that eating pani puri on the road is the ugliest action you can do, because you're going like that, okay? So it is really equalizing everybody. I think there is you've touched upon something which is true, is that people from all walks of life, if the food is cheap, come to savor it. Even wealthy people, we've heard of the Ambanis driving up in the old days in their car and stopping at Muchhad Panwala to buy their pan.
If it's cheap and if it's good.
It's good.
Yeah.
Good is key. Cheap is, by default, is cheap because it's catering to everybody. So the wealthy man can easily afford it, but he's going there because he likes the food. And I think it's a great equalizer in a way. I know there are enough people, there is nowadays this huge movement towards health and hygiene, etc., which I think if it's fried and it's hot, it's lost all its germs. So but nutrition, we don't think about nutrition about when it comes to this food. Is hardly nutritious, it's just tasty. But I think the hygiene issue stops a lot of people from the sort of not evolved, so upwardly mobile people not eating on the streets, because unless they're hardcore lovers of food, then they'll say, chalo yaar, whatever, pet jayega to do Imodium lega, lekin khayega, kind of thing.
Vikas, similarly about what the fountains represent in terms of an urban space. I was just thinking, the slides that you showed, each of the fountains has a very distinct typology. There's Roman mythology in Flora Fountain, and then there's the Parsi heritage, cultural references, the one that's all just nature, and so it's very, very specific in terms of its iconography, and represents communities that are very distinct. But I mean, what do the fountains represent? I think it's almost the opposite of food and buses, where they are representing people coming together, equalizing. I mean, maybe they're public monuments because they're in a public space, but they're also very specific to their time and represent a very, very, I mean, in a way, they represent the past. Would you agree?
Yes, in a way, it all depended upon who was sponsoring the project, like the specific one of the patron. So you had this Indo-Saracenic fountain because it was in the native town, and it's located. So Indo-Saracenic architecture, which is what was prevalent at 1894, that's the time when it was built. So that it's interesting that how Stevens could do that, because Stevens is known for Gothic architecture. The other example is the Assyrian, which you see because it was by a Parsi gentleman. Yeah, so you have that influence. But having said and having worked on it, it was not very well constructed and designed. There was no locking stones, and we had a lot of structural issues. And you have so that had to be resolved because it was all crumbling and falling down. There was no teething or nothing in between the stones. It's all very well documented. So that was an improvement which we did. Renzi Walton was supposed to be the architect of it.
Just personal.
Yeah.
Was that wear and tear, erosion,
Not
or
wear
that's
and
the
tear.
way
I
it
think
was
it
just
was a
designed
fault.
badly?
It was to a certain extent not a very clever design. And coming to Wellington Fountain, you'll be surprised that it is just one single stone. And the trough is 2 stones, one single stone. And they wanted to place an obelisk earlier, but it was getting more expensive. So they decided to do this. So there's a lot of this thing. And coming to Flora Fountain, I think that is just excellent to see how the whole thing was shipped and sent, done in the best of Portland stone, and then how the water engineering works. It comes out and everything. So that is superb. And the allegorical images, they again represent the agricultural, the 4 seasons, and the edible oil. So all had a message, and it all depends who commissioned it and what was it. In a way, architecture is the mirror of the society, and if you come and see what your city square is, you will see one sculpture, and then you'll see 10 more lights, and then you'll see something else. So this is something which we can learn from the past, as how these were designed and executed, and if they see them functional with the plaza, I think it gentrifies the entire area. Because Mulji Jetha Fountain was where the urchins used to be. All the garbage was thrown there. But once you've made this functional, that transforms the entire area.
Okay. I think as just moving it along, as cities mature, one of the things we start thinking about is preserving history and looking to the past and what it means for the future. Because cities have changed so much over time, I think the BST buses probably have had to deal with the most transformation and change, which they may or may not be very dealing with very well. But as we lose historic stops and names, even those are sort of diluting maybe the BST brand. Often buses these days aren't even red. They're so covered in advertising that I don't even know that it's a BST bus. So is there, and there's now a BST museum. What is your thought on how should one be preserving something because it's a critical part of a city's history, or do you think the way to really honor it is to take it forward in a way where it's so much more relevant now that you're making it relevant to now, as opposed to looking back and saying, oh, it used to be this?
No, I think BST, it would be sad if BST is preserved because it's it's a part of Bombay's history. I think it's part of Bombay's future, if it has any, because like as I showed in the chart, if you want to reduce reliance on fossil fuels, you have to have public transport. And buses are very, very convenient mode of public transport. They are much, they are more flexible than rails, for instance. So we have these metro lines that are being built all around the city, but metros are fixed in their routes. Buses can move everywhere. You can change routes, bus routes, depending on demand. You can't change metro routes depending on demand. You have to build an entirely new route. Buses are more affordable, of course, in our city than metros. There's no reason why metros can't be affordable, but that's a separate discussion. So buses really are the future. The authorities, though, do want to preserve BEST only because it's part of Bombay's history. So now, when they are handing over operations to other companies, they say, "Oh no, you run it. You have your driver. You can make the money, but just make sure that you have the branding of BEST." So they want the branding, but they don't want the public service. Yeah.
Kunal, most of the iconic snacks and dishes have anonymous inventors and maybe not undocumented past, since we sort of know where the stories come from. But street foods, by definition, respond to collective taste. So if something isn't good, I suppose the public will reject it and it'll stop being there. But there's also hygiene norms that change, and zoning often. I mean, I was just thinking that whole idea of bisleri for pani puri, now almost everybody is using good water.
Really? I don't know.
I don't know. People are not that caught
at least
up
at weddings and all, they say, "Haan, bisleri dala hai karke."
Right?
Okay.
But things like chana singh, and then there was that buddhi ke baal, which was in these lurid colors,
Yes.
and these
Sutar
grimy
feni.
hands would turn them into these sculptural animals. That's gone. There's
Candy floss.
Candy floss. Then there's sliced kairi, bhutta. All of these things are much less prevalent than they used to be. And as someone who works in this field of documenting food, do you think there's some role to preserve? Once this generation goes, there are lots of foods that will disappear.
Well, I think in the season you still get curry and butta. In the old days, Marine Drive was every 100 yards there was a butta wala. This monsoon I went looking and it was a little difficult to find. Although I did find sweet potato being roasted on koila, which was delicious, and it's just really nice. But zoning, you said, is something that if people looked into, like Singapore has their street food, street stalls and markets. They tried to do a bit at Chopati Beach 30 years ago or 20 years ago, where they gave them all one side and, they put them, I think at even a Juhu Beach, it's fairly organized. But I think there was when I used to work in Nariman Point for years, between 88 and 99, and there was talk that that whole parking lot, which is now Inox, was going to change into a zone, hawker zone for food.
Khowgali's original zoning, food zones?
No, I think they're just organically grown. I don't think, and then the municipality gives the permission and licenses and all that. But I don't think anybody has planned a Khowgali in Mumbai. I think they've just grown organically. But because our street food is, look, a lot of people depend on the streets for food on a daily basis. Okay, lots of people, even Nariman Point, like a fancy Nariman Point, there used to be a pulao wala who just made rice pulao with masala, spices, vegetables, who was right outside Maker 3. So right in where your most poshest offices are, there used to be street food, because everybody is not the CEO of the company. There are other people who want to eat and they have to be fed.
Actually, that's really interesting, because if you look at BKC, I think
Yeah.
That's one of the
Yeah.
examples where there
There-
isn't
so,
any.
yeah, so there is no
right?
hawking zone
And
in-
probably no BST buses that are well connected enough to reach all those offices either.
Yeah, I don't know how BKC is surviving. It looks very dead in the night, and you is just very crowded also. But there are no. I have not seen any hawker centers or even street food really. But it's an important aspect. I think you still get a lot of the food if you go into the right areas, and certain things like boiled eggs. Okay. In the evening, outside bars, there would be a lady selling boiled eggs. And it's just eggs. They cut it, put pepper, salt and pepper, and after a little drinking, people want a little non-veg, as they say.
Vikas, just coming to your the restoration efforts that you were saying can transform a public space, and is there any adaptive reuse component to fountains? Because at some level, there's no great technology anymore. It's just piped water, and they're monuments to something important. But is there any way that they can be reused in any way, or do you think they are just, in terms of a public space, they are revitalizing it? I mean, are people really hanging out at Flora Fountain?
Well, in Flora Fountain, it was always meant to be in the square without any this thing. So it was just an appreciation fountain as what you have, every city
And
has.
so one other question for you. Said the iconography, when it comes from somewhere else, what is the local person, like who doesn't know about Roman mythology? What do I know? Who's Flora?
Yeah,
So what does it mean when
so-
she, why is she on the fountain?
But if that's the way, then Victoria Terminus, Lady of Progress, Ups Primus and Indus, BMC, there's so much. So we've inherited it and we appreciate it. So now it's difficult to explain which is what and what is there, but I think everyone appreciates good art. And I was fortunate
It was
enough.
a facetious
Yeah,
question.
I was fortunate to see it in a closer thing. I think it's the finest sculpture which we have, still in good condition. It took 3 years to clean it, and that's the good part of it. The adaptive reuse thing is, it's only when the area is cordoned off, as in the case of the BH Wadia, this thing, clock tower. There's a space which could have been used to read newspapers or to have a dispensary or to have, where we first thought whether the municipal water connection can be given, but water being scarce and it can be misused. So there was a lot of discussion with Kalagoda and with the BMC, and they said no, make it like you have everything, but it should not be used for this, because the maintenance is a major thing. You have to keep a guard and other things. So that is a recurring cost. So
May I ask a question? On fountains only. Why do we no longer make fountains? The last fountain I saw is at NMACC, and it's a private compound.
That was one of the things.
Yeah.
Water
Haji
feature
Ali
inside
Circle used to have a
something.
huge fountain at Haji Ali Circle.
So some of these fountains, these have been commissioned through the best architects, and they've been selected through a competition or things like that. So it's not, now off late, no one talks about it. And what you see is FRP. You have a fountain, like, and if you go to Lokanwala or Andheri, you have 8 fishes which are pouring water into a, you don't know whether the water is going into the fountain or fountain is throwing the water outside. So we are in that state of this thing.
So just to touch upon a slightly different theme, the concept of an icon to me is always sort of a double-edged sword. Just like a person, there's the danger of idol worship and nostalgia for a past that may not exist or may not really be that relevant. And I think Vikas, that adage that it's old, it's good. I always mix this up. It's good because it's old. It's not old because it's. No, I think it's the other way. It's old because it's
No, you made me forget it.
Okay, I think it's old because it's good. It's not good because it's old, right? And obviously, this is your daily dilemma that you must be wondering about all the time. But given that, and this actually goes to Konal's question, which is that even with CSR funding and people trying to beautify the city and things, nobody's really building a fountain. Why is that? I mean, because you said it could be like a sculpture. So it could be a public sculpture and now there's no question that there's no problem with piping water or having an submersible pump. But a water feature inside a cultural center is not the same as a fountain for the city. So is it just that it's just no longer relevant?
Yeah, I think the trend has shifted, and the architectural language and architectural abstraction, people prefer to have more of
what are they doing instead?
Now FRP is taking over everything.
What is FRP?
Fiber reinforced plastic and things like that. You see the sunflowers, you see water. So that's the, as I said to you, architecture is the mirror of the society, and what you see is, we were the finest city east of Suez, and sometimes you look like you're Thailand here in the night when you drive across with multicolor lights. So that's the taste.
East of Switch.
I couldn't really give you the correct answer because it's just a matter of taste.
Yeah. Yes. Okay. We'll ask. Yeah. Hussein, any system to, just going to whether icons are just we're looking to the past and saying, oh, how great everything was. Any system needs to evolve to remain relevant. And as you said, BST ridership has decreased, the number of buses in the fleet has decreased. I'm assuming the number of routes have decreased. There's bad roads, there's bad traffic. There's fiscal untenability. Everybody thinks the metro is the way of the future. Do you think it's, you wrote a very interesting article in Midday today talking about the metro and how you think the buses are actually the way of the future. I was just thinking there's that sculpture by is it Sudarshan Reddy with the red bus with the wings on it? Sudarshan Shetty. Is it, what is the future? Is the BST just an object now?
The article was in Mumbai Mirror, and it was about the metro, planning of the metro. Yeah. Now what has happened is, in Mumbai, metro planning is very peculiar. So what they've done is they have built metros mostly overground, on existing roads, on the arterial roads. So what happens is you are reproducing the traffic patterns of the city. The value of a metro is that it can, if it goes underground, it can connect parts of the city which were not connected earlier. Everywhere in cities where metros work very well, like you look at the map of the London metro, it has nothing to do with the street pattern. It has its own subterranean geography. And the idea is that because of that, it creates efficiency in movement so that I don't have to take any surface modes of transport. And I can get to different places really fast. So if we had a metro lines which move from the the north-western suburbs all the way to Navi Mumbai, 2 or 3 lines that would cut through the Sanjay Gandhi National Park underground, we would have a completely different way in which people move in the city. Also, metros are extremely expensive. 37,000 crores, Metro Line 3. In that much money, and it moves 16 lakh passengers a day. You can buy 2,000 buses which will move the same number of passengers, and then you can provide this bus-based transport for free, in that 37,000 crores. So the way in which one is spending money in the city for what kind of transport options is really something that we, as a society, need to think about a little. Yeah.
Kunal, evolution in food brings us to the F word, fusion.
Fusion.
Yes, yeah, right. So people have begun reimagining and deconstructing street foods. And I was just thinking just like, Warli painting has been taken out completely out of its cultural context and plastered on T-shirts and trays and whatever, does it still retain any meaning? I mean, are you a purist? Do you think Bhel, if it's reimagined as Chikki and somebody is doing this, is that still Bhel? Is that okay with you?
Well, no, it's not Bhel. It's okay with me. I don't have a major problem with fusion. I just wanted to taste good, whatever it is, okay? Whatever you do, as long as it tastes good, I'm okay with it.
Dosa with a Nutella dosa is okay.
If you like it. I don't like it, but if... well, look at this way, okay? Food is a living creature, and it has to evolve. I keep saying this, is that you can say, I make the original dal, yellow dal in my house, suppose, hypothetically. But the way your mother made it, there will be a difference. The way your grandmother made it, you cannot tell me that my great-grandmother's recipe still works and the food that tasted like that 100 years ago tastes today. So food will evolve. It can go to the ridiculous, but I think as a democratic society, we should allow the ridiculous.
I mean, it may die a natural death because
I don't know. I went to Ghatkopar, I think it was Goregaon or somewhere, okay? Sorry, I know it sounds terrible. I know it sounded terrible when I said this. But it was off the Western Express Highway, so it wasn't Ghatkopar. And, Swati Snacks at Tardeo makes panki, which we had never heard of before they launched it. And it was super duper hit. So now they make it on the road. And I was shooting it and I was looking at what this lady was doing with panki. She had taken the batter and spread it thin on a leaf. Then she grated cheese on it. Then they put capsicum and onion finely chopped on it. And then they added mayo on it. And then which is that unbelievable mayo thing. Momos now come out of a tandoor. Why? But it's ridiculous, but I suppose. But you still will get a proper bhelpuri somewhere. I don't like chana in my bhelpuri or tomatoes because I don't think they are supposed to be there. Who said something? Somebody's or anardana. Why do you put pomegranate on a bhelpuri? It looks richer, That's what. So I think people should experiment, and that's how you'll hit upon something that is really good. Look at pav bhaji, okay? Pav bhaji is a recent invention. It's hardly 50 years old, but it's you take vegetables, you mash it up, and it is delicious. Pav bhaji today. It must have been some sort of fusion when they started. What is this? You're putting tongue. You're doing with, vegetables and spices. So. I think you should experiment, but it'll be nice to have some things. But so you have the option, na? I just want a straight bhelpuri, and I'll tell him, ye mat dalo. So I think there's space for everybody.
That sounds good. Okay, it sounds like we need to wrap this up. Our question was, what do bhelpuri, or I guess bhelpuri better than vada pav. Bhelpuri, red buses and fountains, what ties them together? And I guess you could take the most convenient BST route to pick up a bhel and eat it at your favorite fountain, but I think that's a little too literal. But this conversation sort of reminded me a little bit of a book by Italo Calvino, which is a favorite among architects, Invisible Cities, which is an imaginary conversation between Kublai Khan and Marco Polo, in which they're just talking about these vignettes of a place that is unnamed, and it turns out that it's about the city of Venice. And some of it is completely fantastical and, it's clearly not real, but it's really these very different, disparate elements that come together so that the sum is much, much more and much richer than, just just the parts that bring it together. And I think that's really what this series of conversations about the city is about. So thank you, Kunal, Hussain, Vikas, for such a wonderful conversation. And I think we'll open it up to questions. I don't. How do you?
Hi, Kunal. So I just, when you ended the thing, you spoke about the commonalities or the intersection point. I think Flora Fountain is one of the best intersection points because you have the CTO Vada Pav, you have the tram line you can see, and then you also have the fountain, and there's also a fantastic chai wala, a couple of chai walas there, and you also have a Bel Puri guy. I think so Flora Fountain would be the only intersection point I can think of in the whole city, which has all this, three elements. And you can see the buses coming through, almost every bus going to Nariman Point and Churchgate would pass by Flora Fountain. But there are no other intersection points in the whole of the city. And I think this is because you won't build a fountain today because you need car parking spaces. And people who won't go on the street today because there's no public transport to catch. So they would take an Uber. So I think street food is directly or indirectly proportionate to how much people use the pedestrian or the street. And that won't happen because people are going to go by cars everywhere. The coastal road doesn't have a single street food stall and won't have. So I think it's quite interrelated between these things, that these common water points will go away. And when you spoke about the street food, the only place that I think they reinvented themselves is at Lower Parel, where the carnivals have come back. And I was talking to one of the ladies there, and they said, yeah, I'm just asking the question, Kunal, did you actually see a kind of a re-economization, of this street use, where the street food has actually grown bigger because of the modernity of the city?
It's grown bigger. It has grown bigger. It doesn't exist in the modern parts of developed parts of Mumbai like BKC. But I'll take your point on the BST routes. Okay, when we were young, we used to take a 123 from Tardeo. Okay, you could stop at Dana Chowk at Bharat Jyoti and have Bel Puri or Jahind and have a cold drink. Then you came on to Chopati. You could stop at Chopati and eat over there. Then it went to Yankee Doodle at Marine Drive. We could eat an ice cream there. And we'd get off finally at Kailash Parbat. Bus would go take a U-turn at RC Church, come back, get into the same bus and come back. So you could do that. Even now, if you take 103, you will go into Kalba Devi, Paidoni, Bhuleshwar area. There are a lot of food over there. I think all the bus routes, at the old bus routes at least, you take an 83, 86 and you will find lots of street food everywhere, So it's a great thing about connecting the BST bus with food. Yeah. They've also got a BST bus which has a full kitchen inside it. That was correct, yes.
There is another place which could be an intersection, and that is Bandra Station. Like from Halim to Kichada to the buses to the trains, you have it all. Further down, if you take Chinbai, one of the foods that is sold on the street is the original bombil fry. And one thing that I miss from my childhood is I used to pass by this municipal school where they used to have this katamita karvanda. Now, of course, it's replaced by these sweet potatoes and Veronica sandwiches and God knows what. But our original Bombay sandwich also has been a creation of innovation over time. And the other thing is, when we were talking about BST buses, of course, I have issues with safety and all, which is, since this year, no more BST buses for me. But it is about the lobbies. You take the automobile lobbies, you take the construction lobbies. Where on earth are the common man in the picture then? Not at all.
Yes. So this is to answer the question about the fountains, why we don't have fountains anymore. So many years ago when we restored these two fountains, the Mulji Jetha and the other one, the Wadia Clock Tower, the BMC told us that please, we will not have any water. So we said, what is the point? Because, those are fountains, so we must have them. So at least Mulji Jetha, we do put it on every evening and for a few hours. But the reason being that, the reason why they told us this is because they said that a lot of taxi drivers want to wash their cars. a lot of urchins want to wash their clothes, they want to have baths, and it's very, very difficult to look after. So that's the reason why I don't think we have any more of those.
Just one interesting thing, if you see the Wellington Fountain, and if you see the BH Wadia clock tower, it's been designed that no wastewater goes waste. There's an animal trough, and the animals used to also have it. So it was so cleverly designed. And in case of BH Wadia, they even got the rainwater, and that also went into the animal trough.
Hi, Hussain. Question for you. So 6 months ago, I moved back from Vietnam, which is a country that has zero public transport. So I came back and I appreciated whatever little we have. Unfortunately, on average, every week, I can possibly take 4 or 5 buses. And the number one, and I've just been reflecting on that, the number one reason for that is the unreliability. I don't know when the next bus, if I know it's going to arrive in 4 minutes, I'll wait even 10 minutes if it's a finite waiting period. So your organization, I heard about it today, and so I'm just wondering, is this something that you see as a very low-hanging fruit in a country of engineers? We can't figure out how to put GPS on buses so that everyone knows when these buses would arrive. And I've used the app, it doesn't work. The Chalo app, it's not, I've been on that bus and it's like, oh, I don't know when this next bus is going to arrive. So is there something that, this is just a reflection, what do you think?
The Chalo app basically means, it's called Chalo because there's no bus, up Chalo. So you know, one of the reasons why buses have GPSs now, and the apps can tell you how long it'll take, but usually they tell you that it's going to take 1.5 hours, so you don't wait for it. The problem, the reason why buses are infrequent and also they take very long is because of traffic congestion. Now, the traffic congestion is directly the result of the number of cars on the streets, which are increasing. Every 10 years, we double the number of cars in the city. Now, the rate of doubling has increased. So every 5 years, we are doubling the cars. Where's the road space for cars? So there is going to be congestion. There is one very simple way in which you can fix this problem. And it's a very cheap way of fixing the problem. It's called dedicated bus lanes. You know, on all the major roads, instead of building these metro lines, you take one lane and keep them reserved for buses. Many cities have them, where they have good bus systems. What that does is, if you're driving your car, you're caught in traffic, and you see buses roaring past you, you'll say, oh, you know, next time I'll take this bus. And it is moving more people in that one lane than the other 3 lanes are moving in cars, right? So bus lanes, once you have them, your GPSs will tell you the time, and you will be able to know when, you know, how frequently they'll come. So that is one very simple way of doing it. We have, and not just us, but there are many people in the city who have been suggesting this for a very long time. There was a trial that was done in BKC. It worked so well that they never implemented it. You know, so you know, I mean, this is. I mean, there are very simple ways of making buses work, and we can easily do that.
Yeah, thanks. I'd say that bus lanes in Bombay are just obviously not practical, but GPS, even if it's, I understand traffic and all of those things, but if I know the bus is 2 stops away, I know I'm in that area, I can do the math, I know how long it's going to take. So I guess I still think of that as the lowest hanging fruit, which then turns the table and says, okay, I don't need to maybe buy a car, buses become more reliable. Thanks.
Yeah.
Everyone's able to hear me, yeah. So, Kunal, if you can comment a little bit on the nightlife of street food, because like if you've seen any transformation, I'm someone who likes to stay up late at night. And Hussain, have you been able to convince a friend or a colleague to like move to buses from a private vehicle? If yes, buses or trains? If yes, what was the argument you used? One of those.
So I think the night street food is thriving. And in the same places that it has been for a very long time. There are little things that mushroom only in the night. For example, outside Churchgate Station, there you cannot put a stall during the day, but in the night, the fellow comes with burji and omelette and all that. And it's, unfortunately, restaurants don't have the license to remain open late at night, and there are enough people who come back from work at 1 and 1:30, 2 in the morning. Even the railway station stalls are not open, even if the trains are running at night. And so I think all the street food stalls, if you know where to go, and they're normally not on the main road because the cops are doing their beat on the main road, they're there, and there's good food often.
Yeah, the question about convincing people, the point is not, you shouldn't be in a situation where you have to convince people to take buses. And in any case, that is not the point of a public campaign. The point of the public campaign is to change policy, not trying to convince people to choose buses over cars. If you have good buses, people will take them. You don't need to convince anyone.
This has to be the only Avid panel I've been really hungry through. So we should all chalo from here really quick. But you never mentioned Bade Mia and Chote Mia. I mean, those are the icons I grew up with. But on that... But thank you, Vikas, Hussain, and Kunal for your wonderful thoughts on the topic, and Meera for so skillfully moderating this session. And to our partners, the NGMA, Nidhi and Shruti for hosting us always, and the Kalagora Association. And lastly, to our audiences, I know there was a downpour, but you all are here in right numbers. Thank you for being here. And our next edition of this series is going to be on the 13th of August, where we'll be looking at local trains, cricket maidans, and forts. And next month, we also present the second episode of our series, Motifs, Materials, and Makers, a series that will be celebrating the legacy of the Bauhaus architecture on the 21st of August. We had lots more programs coming up, including at the Opera House, so just stalk us on social media. You'll find out what we're doing, like normal people do. But thank you once again for being here, and have a lovely evening. Good night.